Whoa, hey! Welcome to Creative Block. We're your host, Gene.
And V, we interview people in creative industries about their life, work, and hobbies while we doodle jam.
We asked people on Twitter if they had specific topics they wanted us to discuss, as well as some drawing prompts.
And today with us, we have Owen Dennis. Hey!
Hello!
Hello, it's me, Owen Dennis. It's going fine.
The frog and the hat man himself.
Yeah, that's what I'm known for.
That is what you're known for, nothing else. We just wanted to talk to you about your frogs and hats Twitter.
Great.
But you know what? There's some other stuff you've done, I guess.
Yeah.
So tell us who you are and what you do.
I'm Owen Dennis, and I find it's very hard for me to draw and talk at the same time.
Do not worry about it. That's
let
why
me-
we're here.
I have no... Oh, shit, I don't know how to draw this frog. Well,
That's pretty good.
that's
This
a
is
frog.
mouse.
I'm drawing with a mouse.
That's amazing.
So what was the question? My name's Owen Dennis.
Yeah, just tell us who you are.
Okay, I'm Owen Dennis. I'm the creator of Infinity Train on HBO Max / Cartoon Network. I mean, I don't know. I worked on Regular Show. I worked on Close Enough. I'm from Minnesota originally, basically, and I taught English in China, and I went to art school, and those are the basic building blocks of who I am.
That's great.
Really great. I love that. It's like such a great intro because I was going to ask you, how was it like growing up in Minnesota in terms of like art community?
Oh, terrible. It was. I was in rural Minnesota, so it was sort of. There wasn't a lot, really. I remember a story that I sometimes bring up is when I submitted my art to the local county fair, because it's the only like art thing that I knew of.
Mhm.
And at the time, I was like, I was 14, I think, and I was working in like 3D CG animation stuff, which at the time, which was like 2003, was extremely hard to do. You know, like that wasn't something that kids could just download a program and then start doing it. It was like it took a lot of work and effort. So I made this piece of art and I submitted it to this county fair, and I was really excited. And the county fair came, and then I went to go look for my piece, and I was like, and it was like they had just had this new category called like digital art, and I was like, oh cool, that's me. So I submitted my digital art. I went in, looked for my piece, I saw it, and it had gotten third place, and I was like, okay, cool, that's fine. I want to see like who got first and second, like what happened.
Mm-hmm.
And I walked around, I looked at all the art, and I couldn't find any other digital art, any other art in my category. And I was like looking around. I'm like, I can't find it. It must be somewhere, but I can't find it. So I went and talked to a person who was like running the art area. And I was like, hey, where's the rest of the digital art? And they're like, oh, there isn't any. And I was like, what? And they said, yeah. I was like, but I got third place. And they said, yeah, the judges don't have to say if somebody gets first place or second place or anything like that. They can just choose anything. So my art for a category that I was the only person who submitted got third place. Wasn't even good enough to get second place.
But you know, though, I feel like that's so interesting because I entered a couple of times some of these like Shonen Jump contests in Japan, and they do the same thing. They don't have to give the first or second prize or even the third prize. They can just offer the honorary mention or whatever. So it's really wow. But how did you feel? Like, were you just kind of like, I'll just keep on trucking, or were you kind of like bummed?
I mean, I was mostly just confused, and then I won, I think, $3.15.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Because it's county fair, you know.
Yeah.
And that was it. And then I just thought it was so stupid. Oops, my legs, I'm drawing them backwards. Well, whatever. I thought it was so stupid that I couldn't even really be that mad, which I gotta say for a 14, 15-year-old who was always mad about something, then it's pretty good.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah.
Same hat.
So it was just like I I was just stunned by it, and I'd sort of used it to fuel my drive to get the hell out of there.
Wow. So that was when you were 14. Were you more interested in doing digital art, like 3D, or like did you have a Cintiq? What were you drawing with, or what was your relationship to art at the time?
So Cintiqs, I don't know if they existed at that point. They existed, I guess, but they would have been like $10,000.
Yeah.
Yeah. So because this is the early 2000s, like 3D animation was brand new. Like Toy Story had been released, maybe 6-7 years earlier, and then at this point, it was Toy Story 2 was coming out, and like that was the only 3D stuff. Like there were a couple of 3D Pixar movies, and that was kind of it. I think like Shrek came out around there, but it just wasn't really a thing. But I found it very fascinating because I wanted to go into special effects. Like that's what I was really into, was special effects and stuff, and 3D special effects was a brand new idea at that point. So that's what I was really into, and that's what I was trying to get into with like a computer that we were able to get at CompUSA, and some 3D software that my dad was able to find at the local like computer store. Like that was kind of it. And I could only render things at, I think, 400 pixels by 200 something pixels.
Wow.
Just stuff like that was like, and there was no, I could only look at the tutorial book on how to do things. So I just had to read the manual for this random piece of software that I was using.
Wow.
And like that was the only way I could learn this stuff. That there wasn't stuff online. There was no way to learn it online, and there was no way to learn it through talking to other people because no one was around. Remember, I got third place. So there was no one to help me except just me trying to just click buttons and figure out how it worked. And reading a tutorial book. that was really it.
That's really interesting because it's kind of what Tulip is doing at the beginning of Infinity Train. So there's like a little bit of that. I like that you used kind of like this personal experience to kind of like.
I think it's important for people to. I think it's important for people to not have answers sometimes. Because it makes you try to come up with answers yourself and figure things out yourself. And that's good for you. It's healthy.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like, it's like, this is a whole debate. But before we get into the meat of it, did you know you wanted to pursue special effects? Is that what you wanted to do? What did you do after high school?
Well, after high school, so I wanted to get into 3D animation. And so it was just called, at the time, that we didn't really have terms for it. It wasn't like I'm going to get into computer generated imagery, or like there was that sort of thing. Those words didn't really exist. So I would say like, oh, I want to do 3D animation. People would be like, you mean like 3D like with glasses and stuff? And I'd be like, no, like with a computer, things are in 3D like on the computer. And they're like, oh, okay. And they'd just be like confused about what I was even talking about. So I would, after I when I was in high school, I was using the 3D software to like make my own games, like Myst-like games. Cool. And I was using Half-Life 2, the Half-Life 2 engine, the Hammer engine.
Yeah.
And Unreal, I don't know, 2. some Unreal engine, however long back. So I was using those things. And so when I went into college, I was like, oh, maybe I want to get into video games, or maybe I want to get into this. But I definitely wanted to do like 3D animation. And then when I went to college, which was already a whole difficult thing just to be like to tell my school administrators that I wanted to go to art college. They were like, no, that doesn't exist. And I was like, okay.
That's so crazy. Wow.
Yeah. So they knew it. So Anyway, when I went to college, I got more into 2D sort of stuff when I was there because I realized like, oh, this is way faster. I can just draw it and be done.
Yeah.
But when I was in college, when I was in high school, there was a program in Minnesota. I don't know if it's still there, but it was called I think it was called PSEO, Post Secondary Enrollment Options or something. But it meant that if you got good grades in high school, you could go to a college and get college credits, and not have to go to high school. You could just go immediately to college, and it would be on the state's dime.
Oh wow!
So I got just barely good enough grades that I was able to go do that, and so I was like telling my school like, yeah, I want to go to this local art school. It's Minneapolis College of Art and Design. I want to go there as a high school student. And my school was like, oh, you can't do that. And I was like, well, yeah, I can. Like, they came to our school to tell us that we could do that. And they were like, no, you can't. And I was like, what are you talking about? And it was this whole like back and forth. And I was just like desperate to get out of that school. And out of that place.
That's so crazy. That's like,
yeah. So they were like, no, you can't do that. And then I had to go to the college and be like, they're saying that I can't do that. And they're like, what? And it was this whole back and forth. And my school was like, no, you can't do that, but you can go to our local community college. And I was like, no, I can go to, the law says that I can go to any college. And they're like, well, you can only do that if we get a fax from them with this thing and this thing and this thing. And so I had to contact the college to like fax them all this stuff, and it was this huge ordeal. And I had to get a specific fax machine in my high school to print, so it couldn't just be any fax machine. It had to be this fax machine in like this specific administrator's office, and like all this shit.
Why do they care?
Yeah, like I can't believe how old were you?
I was 17 at that point, 16, wow. 17.
You were already going to the DMV at 17.
Yeah, exactly. And it was like, I found out eventually that it's because if I went to, I was out in Lake Elmo, which is like this 25-minute ride from Minneapolis and St. Paul. And this Minneapolis College of Art and Design was in Minneapolis, obviously. But if I went there, then the money that would have gone to the school locally got moved to Minneapolis instead. So they didn't want me leaving the school district. They didn't want me leaving the school district. So that's why they kept being like, no, you can't. You can't do that. It's because they didn't want my money to go somewhere else.
So interesting. That is very interesting.
I had a similar thing, but in college, where like I went to a smaller art institute and I wanted to get an internship at a studio because that was what I wanted to do, and I had to fight really hard. Like similarly, where I had to like submit forms and like go over people's heads and like I had to keep meeting with the administrator. It was just like, hey, do you want me to succeed? Like I don't know, like because it seems like you're really, I don't think they care. It's just like numbers and
it's just
money.
the average person who's in charge of something. They just want to do whatever their job is and then go home.
Absolutely.
And they don't really care about like whatever it is that you actually need from them.
Absolutely.
So, and that applies to, all sorts of parts of society.
It's an important reminder, I think, because I think like people get it in their heads that like the people in authority, and that includes, schools and colleges, that they're going to be looking out for you. And at the end of the day, like you said, like, no, they don't.
No, they're just a random person that wants to go home.
You're one of hundreds. You're like, they want to go home, and you're one of hundreds of people who they will forget in 3-4 years, whatever. And like, sometimes you get lucky with a really considerate, caring teacher or administrator or counselor, whatever. But like, you have to look out for yourself, and sometimes you have to go over people's heads, and you have to break the rules a little bit. Recently,
I had done some. I was going to talk with some students or something from my college. Yeah. And I reached out to the person in charge, and I was like, "Hey, do you want to have me come talk to the students?" And they were like, "No, that's okay."
What?
I was like, huh? And then
put ideas in their heads.
And then I contacted the teacher that I knew who would have been in charge of that class. And I was like, hey, did you not want me to come talk to the students? He's like, oh, you can come talk to them. Yeah, that'd be great. Come talk to the students.
God.
And then I did. And I was like, God, it's because they had to pay me $100 or something.
Oh, no.
Oh no, $100. I wasn't even expecting to get paid in the first place.
Right. Yeah. I assume that, yeah, who cares?
But yeah, there's always somebody that's like, I don't want to have to do an extra piece of effort on behalf of anything. And that's why a large amount of bad things happen in the world.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I get it to a degree, you know. It's like, yeah, like who knows what else those people are dealing with just even outside of work. So it's like, I think you just can't expect anyone to. My life experience has been like you can't expect anyone to do things for you. So you have to like push and hope that you know things will work out.
I mean that sort of thing got me. I mean that's gotten me in trouble and it's helped me.
Absolutely,
it definitely got me in trouble with things for my show, but also helped. So it's sort of like it's one of those things. It's like I don't know. Might as well do the thing that you need to do.
Yeah.
And then ask for forgiveness later.
Absolutely. No, I live by that. Like ask for forgiveness, not permission. There's been many times where if I had asked for permission, things wouldn't have worked out.
Oh,
like
absolutely.
It's crazy, but that's how it is. You have to have that bravado of like, fuck it, I'll do it myself. Like it's just that's what it takes. So how did that end up playing out with your high school?
I left and I was able to. It worked out.
So
I was able to go take
college
classes and stuff. Yeah,
cool.
But it was interesting. I remember after I started taking those college classes, like all of my high school work started getting much better too. Partially because I think I was just happier, and partially because you know the effort and the thought that it takes to do college level classes versus high school level classes. It just ended up applying to all of my high school classes. Like, I have to write a 1.5-page essay. I don't care. Fine, I can do that. Because, you know, in the college class I'm taking, I have to do a 6-hour drawing every, like twice a week or something. You know, so it just felt like other things ended up feeling a little bit easier in a way because I was taking those college classes.
Yeah, well, I think it sounds like you're the kind of person who just wants a challenge, right? Like it's.
Oh yeah. I get very bored very easily. That's why. I mean, that's part of why Infinity Train is structured the way it is.
Yeah, anthology.
Anthology, and like, every single train car is a new world. Great.
Huh.
It's always something
interesting.
different. I never have to go back to the same place again.
You write what feels comfortable. That's interesting.
I think that's really cool that the way you structured the show like that, which feels like it is still a show. We have these characters that we always come back to, so there is a sense of familiarity, but there is also the sense of like, you know, you're gonna be with this element of familiar that you're comfortable with, but also in a space where they're uncomfortable because you don't know what's going to happen. And I think that's really, really cool.
Yeah. And I mean, Infinity Train sort of came about because of I don't know where this quote came from. It was given to me secondhand by someone else. But it was basically like every single television show that somebody makes is a reaction to the previous television show that they've worked on.
Oh, interesting.
Which is pretty damn true so far that I've experienced. Like Infinity Train, like I was working on Regular Show, which I loved. Regular Show was fantastic. It was a great work environment, and I loved writing and doing all that stuff and drawing and all that stuff. It was a great experience and taught me a ton. But also there are certain things that just aren't compatible with Regular Show. And it's not because, you know, it's a bad idea or something. It just doesn't fit the tone of the show, right?
Right, yeah.
So there are all these little things that are just like, well, I guess that won't work. Well, I guess that won't work. But I really want to do it. And so it just gets locked away in your brain as this thing you want to do later. And then Infinity Train was like all that stuff comes out. So like Regular Show, every single episode was self-contained, pretty much. Every single episode is self-contained. the house is destroyed at the end of one episode, and the next episode the house is back. Like all that sort of stuff. It's an elastic universe. And on regular show, like basically all the characters were boys, and on regular show, our main characters were very stupid. And so when I was doing Infinity Train, I was like, oh, I want to do a show with someone who's smart and also every time something happens, there's consequences and it follows you into the next episode. And I just had all these things that I wasn't able to do on regular show. Again, not because regular show was bad. It was just because that just wouldn't fit the tone of the show. So Infinity Train ended up being like, as much as I could do, that was the opposite of what I'd been doing for the past like 4 years.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think that's actually, like, talking about tone of shows, it's like something that is, I don't see a lot of people talking about it online, but going from a show to another, I think this is the hardest thing to learn. You know, people will be like, yeah, we need to learn like how to draw the characters and all that stuff. But I think the hardest thing to learn when jumping on a new show is like learning the tone, because there are things that works on one show but will not work on the second show, just because it's just not, like the genre or whatever. Like it's a show where you don't do close-ups or whatever. I don't know.
Well, yeah, but that was also a thing with Infinity Train, is I was like, oh, I don't want to do regular show had very specific staging. So on regular show we had what's called Sitcom Staging, which is like a flat room with the vanishing point way off to the left, way off camera, or way off to the right, way off camera, or like right in the center off camera, or like right in the center of the horizon. And so it was always just very flat, and so you could do a flat thing and then a close up and then a zoom out and then a close up and then a zoom out. And then when things were like action oriented, you could like do dynamic stuff. But when on Infinity Train, I was like, no, I specifically want to change how we shoot it, like how we I want to change the camera perspective on stuff. I want to have down shots, I want to have like up shots, and I want to have like all these sorts of things.
It's very cinematic,
which we did more and more through the show as it progressed. And then comedy would end up being very like, that every time we'd have a comedic moment, you make it very flat, and that's something that helped a lot on regular show. But it was also that's how we'd sort of change things. Then you can sort of see how that just sort of progresses over the course of Infinity Train as a show. Like early on, we were sort of starting to break out of the regular show mold, and then as the show progresses, you can sort of see that it changes and shifts and things like that into what sort of shot choices we use. And that was a lot of fun.
Taking it back a little bit to when you were in college, and what was your experience like in college? Was it mostly positive, or is there like things that you think like you could have done without? And then I want to tie it into, how did you land your first gig?
College was great. I had a great time in college. I would say, I think college helped me most in that I need a certain amount of structure to make things. Like I need it helped me understand like what my limits are on how much I can make in a certain hour time span. It let me know it let me meet a lot of people that were like-minded. That was one of the biggest things, is like as I said, I was out in the middle of nowhere where there were no other people in art. My mom was an artist, and I had family members who were art, but it's not the same as meeting people who are like, the same age as you. Who were into art. So I finally met people who were into art, and it was like the craziest, coolest thing, and I felt so like known and loved and like cared about, and like my opinions meant something, and like I was able to give. It was just very inspiring being around all these other people who were doing things that I was like, oh, I've never thought of this particular kind of art in that way, or I've never thought about doing things in that style. I've never seen that style, or like all kinds of fun stuff. It was really, really cool, very eye-opening. And I feel like I got the most out of college, mostly because of the people that were around me. The teaching was all helpful, but really the vast majority of what I got out of it was understanding my own needs for what I need to work, and understanding and like getting to know people who were also creative. And it's one of the reasons this pandemic has hurt me so much, is because like I spent, 10, 20 years trying to find people that were like me that I could hang out with. And now it's been almost 3 years of
isolation,
being by ourselves. And it's like all that stuff, all that work that I put in trying to find my tribe, I guess.
Yeah.
is just, it's one of the reasons I want to get back into the office and like all that sort of stuff. And it's just like, I just want to find my tribe again, because I'm feeling so like lost, and it's very lonely.
Yeah,
it's very lonely when you're not around people that think in similar ways and are doing this thing that you're doing. I think about like, no, it's gone. I already forgot what I was thinking about.
Do you consider yourself an extrovert, do you think?
No, absolutely not. But I do find that when I find that my brain can only take something so far. If I'm thinking about something creatively, I'd like to be able to, say something to run it past someone else who I respect and who has good ideas and stuff. And I can do that right now. It's just not the same as sitting in a room. For a couple hours.
Trying to chase people down to look at your thing is like pulling teeth. It's like, hey man, I worked on this thing for hours. Can you take a look? And they're like, yeah, sure. And then like days pass, and you're like, could you please? Like, really.
Yeah, I've got, and it's the inverse. This is the same. Like people do that with me. I have friends who are reaching out to me being like, hey, could you look at this thing for me quick? And I'd be like, yeah, sure. And then I don't get to it for weeks. And it's just like, it's just not the same as being in a room and telling jokes to each other and then deciding to randomly pull up, Freddy Freaker on YouTube or whatever. And like, that's what you're, it's humans like communicate face to face. That's how we talk. That's how we've evolved. So doing things this way has just been very, very difficult for me.
Yeah.
I never thought I would miss human contact.
I thought that too.
Honestly, I was honestly pretty okay with it for a while, and then I was like, oh fuck, I can't. This is really killing me.
I had a moment like right before the pandemic hit where I remember saying to somebody like, man, I could just use a break from people right now. And, and then like, whoops, got my way and then some.
And, I remember what I was going to say. The people that I interact with the most right now are like, my wife and occasionally like my friends and stuff. But the people that I interact with the most professionally right now are all executives. And,
I see. Mm-hmm.
And executives are just it's a different kind of person.
Yeah.
And I remember one time a couple weeks ago, I was meeting with some executive somewhere, and I was talking about how like, it was just the small talk before the actual pitch or whatever it was. And I was like, I was thinking about getting a new Cintiq because the Cintiq I have is like, I don't know, it's like 12 years old and the backlight's starting to burn out and it's a whole thing. And I remember looking at them all on screen and realizing they were just nodding and going, mm-hmm. And I'm like, they have no idea what a Cintiq is.
No.
And I'm just like, oh my God, I need to talk to artists and writers again. God damn.
That's so funny. That is, it's funny because I forget that because I'm still, I'm still just like directing, so I'm still like talking with artists all the time, like on Zoom and in chat. And it's true, I forget that like when you talk with like the top people at projects, it's like I guess business oriented or like
It's just they're looking at very different stuff than artists are looking at. So it's just a whole other like part of your brain. Yeah. And so the part of my brain that it's the part of my brain that takes work, not the part of my brain that takes enjoyment. So it's just like it can just slowly sort of kill you. Just be like, God.
I was gonna ask you kind of how is it like for you to to land your first gig. Your first gig was regular show.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And how long? This is a question that I love to ask because I think it's relatable for our audience. But like after you finished college, like how long was it for you to break into the industry?
Okay, so when I was in college, one of the things that I said that I really got out of going to college and stuff was meeting all these people and stuff. So that's a big part of it is networking. And it's not like networking like, oh, I got to get in there and give my business card to people. It's just like your friends, you know, there's people you hang out with.
Yeah.
So when at the end of my junior year in college, I went and was feeling incredibly burned out. I just finished the stop motion short that was like enormous. And it was like a foam latex stop motion short, which no one at my college had done. Which also, by the way, stunk up my apartment so badly they had to evacuate the building.
Oh, God.
Yeah. Because... and then the firemen had to be called in to find out. They thought there was like a poison gas leak or something.
Oh, man.
Oh, my God.
Because foam latex, for people who don't know, foam latex, you have to bake it. And when you first pull it out, it smells like ammonia. And then when you bake it, it smells like sulfur. So there's like no good smell. So I got in big trouble for that. But anyway, I was like super burned out, and I was like lying on my floor crying, covered in ants because we had an ant problem.
That's a visual. Holy shit.
And I called my parents, and I was like, I don't know what to do. Everything sucks. And my mom and dad were just like, why don't you just go do something else? I was like, okay, like what? And my mom said, well, when I was in college, I went and I worked in Yellowstone. We could do that for a summer. And I was like, okay. And then I did that for a summer. So for a summer in between junior year and senior year, I applied to Yellowstone National Park, and I became a housekeeper in Grant Village. And while I was there, I met a whole bunch of people that are about my age, like Chinese students who were Chinese. And they used it to sort of like, oh, this is a cool way to get into America, make a little bit of money, travel around for the summer, head back home. And like, a lot of people from other countries are doing that. It's a really cool way to get in and see like cool stuff in America. So I met a lot of students who were from China, became friends with them, and they were like, I just found them to be very, very interesting because they had such a completely different perspective from anybody that I'd met in, white as hell Minnesota. And so it was just like talking with them and learning about China and all this sort of stuff. And they're like, oh, you're really good at explaining words. So you should go be an English teacher in China. And I was like, haha, guys, come on. You can't just go be an English teacher in China. And they were like, yeah, you can. And then I looked it up, and it turns out, yeah, you can.
Wow,
so
that is so cool.
Yeah. So all at the time that you needed to be an English teacher in China was a 4-year degree of some kind. It didn't matter what kind of 4-year degree, just a 4-year degree. And also you had to have been born and raised in America, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, or the UK.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
So that was the only thing they were looking for. And then you could go to China and take a 2-week course and become a teacher.
2 weeks. Wow.
2 weeks.
Okay. That's
So,
nothing.
yeah. And they would pay for your flight, and they would pay for your housing and all that sort of stuff. And you could live on campus for whatever the school is, which is just like all this stuff it's crazy. That's so much stuff that you're getting paid for. So I was like, okay, well, I'll do that.
Yeah.
So I did that for 3 years, right after college, because after college I was feeling super burned out, and I was like, guys, I don't know. Maybe I don't want to be in animation. I don't know. My friends are like, no, you have to get started on your career. And I was like, nah, I'm going to go to China and avoid all responsibilities here in America. And my friends were like, that's stupid. And I was like, we'll see. But what I did find was when I explained my reasoning to people who were like my parents' age and older, they're always like, oh, I wish I'd done that. I wish I'd done that when I was a kid.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay. So maybe I'm making the right decision here. Like everyone who's my age is like, no, we got to go do this thing. but everyone who's older than me is filled with regrets and telling me they wish they'd done what I was doing. So maybe this is the right decision. And it was a great decision. It was one of the most important and meaningful experiences of my life. So I did that for 3 years. And at the end of 3 years, I was like, I'm so sick of China. It's very lonely living in a country where you're not, obviously you probably know about this, but like you don't know anybody in this new country. You might not speak the language. Like I didn't speak Chinese, and so it really limits like who you're able to talk with and what you're able to do and like all this sort of stuff. And so it can be very lonesome. And so while I was there, I used it as time to learn, travel, all that sort of stuff. I did art. Like I made like 2 albums and I made a music video and like all kinds of stuff like that.
Very cool.
And then I was like, I got to get out of China. And so I just contacted everybody that I knew who was back in America still, who had gotten jobs, and they've been getting jobs, trying to get jobs for the past 3 years while I was just hanging out in China. And I rode their coattails and all the work they put in by coming out to LA and stuff. And I talked to my friend Toby, who was my roommate for a couple years, or 1 year, I guess, whatever. He was my roommate and he's a good friend of mine. And he was like, oh, there's an opening on regular show. And I took the storyboarding test and I didn't know if it was funny or not. And I just did it in my room by myself and then sent it on. And they're like, that's funny. What can you start on whatever month? And I was like, okay. And then I had to fly to America and start on regular show. So that was a very long answer. I'm sorry.
No, that's
no. I love that.
But the answer is, I made friends in college. Those friends got jobs somehow, and then I got a job by asking them for a job.
I find that detour really interesting because I think that like, well, I guess I want to ask, like, did that time in China like affect your writing later on, or like, because it sounds like you were working on a lot of stuff while you were out there. So was it fulfilling in the long run?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you really don't understand who you are and the culture that you come from until you live in a different culture.
Yeah, definitely.
You know? So like I had no God, this is so stupid. When I went to China, I didn't even know how to say hello. All right.
Wow.
When I went to China, I knew how to say one thing, and it was 我觉得你很可爱, which means I think you're cute.
That's very important.
Because I was trying to impress a girl in Yellowstone.
Right.
And that's all that I learned. So I remember specifically when I was on the plane and someone was like, oh, where are you going? And I was like, oh, I'm going to China. I'm going to live there for a while. And they're like, oh, cool. So you learned Chinese and stuff? And I was like, no. Should I have?
Yeah. Well, should you have? Like, were you able to get around at least?
Yeah, I mean, eventually. Yeah, I was able to figure out eventually. There was a lot of I used a notepad that I'd carry around with me, and I'd draw what I needed on the notepad and then show it to people. And that was before smartphones were totally ubiquitous. Totally. So my first year I just did a lot of drawing, and my second year I was sometimes able to use a smartphone that I had to translate a single word, and like that was about it. But I remember one time looking for Walmart and like drawing the Walmart logo and like things like that.
Those are handy skills to have. Art skills are good to have.
I love that you were still practicing drawing though, you know? It's like you had to.
Yeah, it was the only way I could communicate.
That's crazy. Yeah, like I've gone to Japan a couple times and I want to go there, and V was there for a year?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
I would love to go for a long period of time, but yeah, I mean, even with smartphones, because when I do go, like I'll have Google Translate and I'll just like type a thing, whatever.
Yeah.
I managed to communicate all right. Plus, there's a lot of English all over the place in Tokyo.
Yeah.
But like, God, yeah, just like living there for 2 months. Like my girlfriend and I have talked about going there for a long period of time, and I'm like, how do I sign up for a gym? Like, I know V, you had that experience. Like trying to like.
It's actually you totally can. Maybe we don't have to talk about it on the podcast, but
although maybe it's insightful for somebody. I don't know.
No, I mean, honestly, because the American and Japanese relationships, I mean, there's like history, so there's like a lot of there's a lot more. I found it to be there was a lot more English to Japanese, how to learn the language rather than like French to Japanese. There's a lot of like very practical.
Sure.
There's a lot of very
I did find it very hard over there because I was in Shenzhen for my first year, which did not have any English anywhere, so it was only Chinese.
Oh, that's tough.
So and it's also like you can't look at a Chinese character and go like, oh, I think it sounds like this. You just have to know. So it was very difficult in that respect, and it was just like, that's why I had to draw so much and to be able to even function in society. And it was it's pretty nuts. I think about it now, and I'm like, man, that was kind of crazy, huh? But at the time, I was just like, yeah, whatever. I was gonna do it.
Yeah, it's those early 20s when you just kind of do it.
Yeah. Very, very fearless attitude.
Yeah.
But I think it's great though. Like, I feel like I love that you brought that up, because like you said, like the older people in your life were like, this is something that you have to do now. Like, now that like you're still a kid, you don't have any attachments, and that's the best moment to have like those life experiences. Like, I do like a lot of these like working holiday visas. That's what I applied to go to Japan. They only run until you turn 30. And I think that's mostly for that. It's because that's the moment in your life when you're like past college, just before you settle down, and it's the moment when you can like try stuff. Because I believe, like, especially for you later going on a board driven show where you have to come up with jokes and writing, it's like, I guess you do have to use like all like from your life experiences, right? Like, how much from all of that
there was actually a whole regular show episode that was about my experience in China. There was an episode called Hello China where Benson went to China, and basically everything in that episode, the school that he goes to was quite literally a tracing of the school that I taught at.
Wow.
That's crazy.
And the classroom was just the classroom that I taught in. Everything, and even Benson, when it's like, you didn't learn Chinese, he's like, no, it's I just have to learn English. I'm teaching English. Why would I have to learn Chinese? So the whole thing's filled with jokes that are super, super specific to English teachers in China. And I remember specifically, I've gotten emails from English teachers that are currently in China, and they're like, oh my god, I can't. This is incredible. And I've gotten. I also know that particular episode is like, I specifically remember one time. I specifically remember that, like, in that school, it's like a huge thing. Like, oh, this American TV show has our school in it. It's crazy. Like, it's a huge thing there.
Yeah. So, what was the initial sort of moment where Infinity Train was pitched, and what was that process like?
So pitching is a multi-step process. It's like you pitch to one person who then gives you a little bit of a green light to do something else, and then they pitch something, and then you pitch again, and it's just this like larger and larger group of executives for every pitch. I remember when I first pitched it, I pitched it as like one of two things. I was like, yeah, I could do Infinity Train, or I could do this Galactaron thing, which is my like cartoon alien band at the time. And I can do like either one. I don't really know what I want to do with this. All I know is like Infinity Train, it's this girl, she gets on a train, and I don't know, she wants to get off the train. Like, that was really it. And slowly over time, talking with the executives and doing all that sort of stuff, it slowly started changing into being like this, there's a number on the hand, and there's like all this sort of stuff. It was a slow building process.
So you kind of developed it. You developed it in the, like, with the studio. Like, it sounds like you brought them a pretty rough version originally.
Yes. Yeah. I think that was helpful because it's helpful to go in with like, oh, this is what I want to do, and I know what I want to do, and to know the tone and all that sort of stuff. It is then helpful to have a bunch of sort of blank spaces in it, because then people can contribute, and it's better in the long run on the thing that you're making. It's better if like other people can contribute, because then they feel some sort of like ownership over it. And so when they're pitching it to their boss, they can be like, yeah, there's this thing and this thing and this cool idea, and some of those ideas might be their ideas.
Lots of politics.
And yeah, so it's helpful to have a few blank spaces, which is what I provided. And so it became something that was sort of developed with them in tandem a bit.
I like what you were saying about having the spaces in a pitch, and I think that like that there's kind of a misconception sometimes that like you need to have a fully fleshed out show when you're pitching, and no, you shouldn't, and like the execs don't want to see that, and it's like you're saying like they want to be able to contribute to it. Yeah,
I think there are some executives that would prefer that you walk up and go like, here's my entire fleshed out thing, I know everything about it. Those people exist, I've met them.
Yeah.
However, I would say that the majority of the time, if you have some stuff that's sort of open and empty that they can sort of help fill in the blanks on, yeah, they'll feel ownership over it, and they'll want to make it because like they also were involved with it, you know, and so it feels more personal to them.
Yeah, it's tough. I went through it with my show Planet Panic, and it was like I tried to think of it as like a toolbox that I'm not developing a show, I'm developing a toolbox, and it was just like, here is the characters, here is the tone, like you were saying, like there's these things that other people can contribute to, but
yeah,
I think even I went into it with way too much information, and so it was like,
well, because I mean, in the end, it's going to be a collaborative thing anyway.
It is.
Like in the end, you're going to have a room full of writers that are also adding to it, and you're going to have a bunch of artists that are also adding to it, and you're going to have, it's just like when people say like, oh, you created Infinity Train to me, I'm always sort of like, yeah, kinda, yeah, because it's, while I know that it's like entirely, I directed it and I guided it and I did all this sort of stuff, it wasn't entirely me, it was a whole bunch of people. And so I always have this sort of, it always feels a little bit disconnected whenever someone's like, you created Infinity Train. It's like, I kind of created Infinity Train.
It was like a couple hundred people probably making. Yeah. But, you know, I mean, you're overseeing it. You're curating it. It's like I see it as like a conductor of an orchestra, you know. It's like,
right.
I think that everyone knows, well, maybe not everyone, but the people who are in the know, they know that there's an orchestra that's playing, you know, actually making the show, but the conductor is the one who keeps it all in to the right tempo.
It's, so. I feel like mostly my job was to be like, just like, it's like bowling, like there are the pins, we're going for the pins, and my job is to just kind of keep the ball in roughly the correct area
you're
to
the
get
bumpers.
A strike. Yeah, like that's kind of what my job is.
Yeah.
That's good. I like that. Yeah, it's interesting.
I wanted to ask you kind of, how was the process of pitching like for you, especially in regards to, you have like a very serialized, you pitched a very serialized show, which wasn't exactly, I mean, I guess it was kind of in the zeitgeist. Do you feel like it was in the zeitgeist at the time when you pitched it? And also, I know it was script driven. How hard was it? Like, is it something that you can talk about when while you were pitching and stuff?
So I think a thing that helped me a lot was Over the Garden Wall. Over the Garden Wall's existence helped a ton. Because Over the Garden Wall was like this mini-series, and they were like, it's this 10-episode mini-series, 11 minutes each. And so I was like, hey, we'll just, we'll take that same format. It's 10 episodes, guys. You guys have already done this once before. And it's 11 minutes each. You've already done this once before. And so because Over the Garden Wall broke this ground, I was able to jump in, again, riding someone else's coattails and be like, you already know this. You're comfortable with this already. Let's do this thing you're already comfortable with. And they're like, oh, okay. And it becomes, that's part of the thing when you're pitching is you're basically walking into a room with a bunch of people who've never met you, and you're trying to convince them to give you millions and millions of dollars. And like, that's a crazy, that's a crazy thing, you know? So the more you can do to make them comfortable with who you are and what your project is and all this sort of stuff, the better. So because I'd worked at Cartoon Network for a while, they're like, okay, well, we've never heard anything bad about him. He's been working here for years. So there's that. And there's also like, I was going like, hey, Over the Garden Wall, it worked. So, you know, maybe you can try it this way. And so we tried, I sort of pitched it as a mini series similar to what Over the Garden Wall was. And they liked it. I wanted to do it slightly differently. I wanted to do it script driven. They didn't really bat an eye on it being script or not. There was, I remember after the pilot, I mean, I've gotten different kinds of pushback in different areas on Infinity Train when I was making it that I thought were ridiculous, and I moved past them. But yeah, the pitch was basically helping them feel comfortable with this concept, especially something that was about like it was about divorce. Like the first miniseries is about divorce, which is not something that most networks would feel comfortable explicitly talking about on TV for children. So I was lucky, I think, in a way, for a bunch of reasons. I was able to follow the Garden Wall, and then also the executive who was in charge had gone through divorce, and there were multiple executives in charge who'd been children of divorce or had parents who or were divorced themselves. And so when I was sitting here going like, here's this topic I want to talk about, all of them felt a personal connection to it, and they all wanted to do that. And so it was actually a little difficult sometimes trying to do the story because they all had such personal and specific experiences with divorce from these different perspectives,
right?
Being like, this is not your experience. This is Tulip's experience. This is a different person. So that was sometimes a thing. And also something that helped was when I was trying to explain the show, I just was having so much trouble over and over again. I remember one time they asked all these questions in this huge email, and the writers and I came up with like a 16-page thing that answered all of their questions. And I remember we went to the room with them, and they held the thing in their hand. They said, "This doesn't make any sense. What is the show?" And then we spent like a week writing all this stuff, and I was like, okay, that didn't work. And then eventually I was able to describe it to them just by like showing a comic book, making a comic book of Infinity Train and being like, so this is how the train works. There's this guy, Bert or something. And the Bert has a problem in his life, and he gets on the train, and then he can't escape the train because it's a desert, and also there's monsters out there. And just like having drawings that just showed this thing. And I remember it was like a 3-page, 4-page set of drawings. And and I stole that idea from Ian Jones Cordy, who did that for OKKO. So I steal everything from other people just to get things to work.
Well, that's how it works. You stand on the shoulders of giants.
And so I tried that, and then they were like, oh, this is a really big thing. This could be like more than just 10 episodes. And I was like, I guess, I don't know. And they were like, cool. And then they came back a little while later. This is after the pilot had come out and stuff. They came back a little while later, and they're like, cool, we'll give you 20 episodes. And I was like, but we already had a story for 10 episodes. And they're like, okay, well, give us 20. And I was like, okay. And then I had to come up with how we were going to make 20 episodes. And that's how we ended up doing the Story of Anthology thing. I think I went a little off topic into other stuff, but yeah, roughly.
I think
roughly answered your question, I hope.
This is so great. This is like so much really interesting information. I love it. And how was kind of like the process for you writing the whole season? Like, do you just kind of like outline it? Like, how far did you go into writing the season? Like, is it just like a sentence per episode, or like, are you talking plot points? I'm like really interested in that.
So what we would do is Cartoon Network hadn't done a scripted TV show in like 10 years or something at that point. So we just kind of had to make it up as we went, and none of us had any experience working in scripted. And so I made the general outline and what I wanted each car to be and what I wanted each episode to be. And then I got together with Madeline Carey-Pell and Cole Sanchez, and we talked about, we fleshed it out a little bit more. And basically it's the way we do every season is the writers and I would get together in a room and we talk about, like, what are we feeling? Like, what are we feeling right now? What's going on in the world? Like, how are we expressing what we're feeling? How do those things come across? And we just talk about, like, our lives and subjects that are just sort of coming up in our lives. And then we would sort of distill those down into, like, oh, this is sort of a subject that's interesting. What sort of discussions can you have about this subject? And then we'd go into, like, different directions and angles you can look at a certain topic. And then we would be like, okay, well, so our thesis statement is basically this thesis statement for the season. Like, this is what we want the audience to feel by the end. So how do we make that happen? And then we have a character who has to get to that point. And so we therefore must start the character in the opposite point. And so the first episode, they should show the exact opposite of where we want them to be by the end. And then it's just a lot of working backwards from huge broad themes and then downward.
Sure.
And then we try to figure out, like, well, where does it feel like we want to have some of these large realizations and moments and plot points and stuff in a 10 episode arc. And then we distill it further. And then what are some of the questions that come up with this particular subject? What are the answers to those questions? How can you address, like, what sort of things could get in your way that would make you address those questions? And that's how we would generally come up with a season.
That's really interesting. I love that. So you're starting from the emotion first, and then you kind of build it into plot. It's really great.
Because, I mean, part of the thing is that, like, a lot of people, after they've seen the pilot, were like, oh, Infinity Train's like a mystery show. And if there's anything that I've learned over time, it's that when you're in something for the mystery, it's not going to be satisfying in the end, almost ever. Because every mystery that has ever been done at this point has been done at this point. Like, we know every single twist, every single thing that can happen. So what we decided was, well, we want people to stay invested about this character and the emotions. So what we'll do is we will get rid of mysteries early on. So the first thing we'll do is, by episode 5, I think it was, we explained, this is what the number is, and this is what the train is, and this is what's happening. And then it's like, well, but there's still 5 more episodes, so what could we possibly be? What are we going to listen? What are we going to watch for the rest of this? And that's how we'd make sure that it's like, you're caring about the character, and that's what's pulling you through. You're not being pulled through so that on episode 10 you can get this big reveal about, like, ta-da, this is what it was the whole time. And then you'll be mad because you'll be like, yeah, but that kind of sucks. That wasn't what I was hoping it would be. And every single person would have built up so much expectation for what that is, that it's like, you don't really care about what the story was or the character. You end up caring about this mystery that once it's answered, you're never going to, there's no reason to rewatch it or to think about it ever again, because, like, you already got the answer to this one thing. So the thing that's actually important in a mystery story, because I used to read a lot of Agatha Christie and stuff when I was a kid. I loved Agatha Christie.
Yeah.
The thing that's actually important in a mystery is the why. Why did this happen? Yeah. Not the what. Because if it's the what is very easy to answer. A murder happened.
Yeah.
But the why is the most interesting part, because the why is when you get into a person's past, a person's current thinking, a person's relationships, a person's everything. You get into everything when you get to why, because why has no solid answer. It's always an amorphous blob that's always ever changing as a person lives their life and has their experiences through their life. So going that way, I think, is the best way to treat every sort of mystery.
I think it's so interesting you say that because I love mystery shows and I love true crime, and I think
Yeah.
and it always starts with what happened. It's like
Yeah.
it always starts with like the murder happened, or like this crazy unbelievable thing happened, and then the show is just about like going all the way back and being like, so how did we get here? And
Yeah.
it's so funny. I never thought
And I
about
think
it that way.
I just think it's really important that, because you can go into motivations that a person has forever. You can just keep going and keep going and keep going. But the what, like the how did they do a thing, that's, you have an answer. That's an easy thing to answer. Someone's brain and why they do things, that's the hard part to answer, and that's the part that can keep you engaged forever.
Yeah, that's so true. So interesting. I love that. Like, there's not that much like a mystery-ish. Well, obviously, you kind of took it away from mystery, but I thought what I was really excited with Infinity Train coming out was like it felt like it was a show that wasn't on Cartoon Network. Like that wasn't yet, at least. You know what I'm saying? Like it feels like it does belong in the brand, but I was like, I haven't seen a show like this on Cartoon Network.
Yeah, I mean, I can't really speak to like why networks pick up or don't pick up things. I mean, I can, but you know, it's all based on emotions but an executive has at that particular moment.
Yeah.
But I think it was just I know at the time at the Cartoon Network, it was sort of like the person who was in charge sort of felt like he seemed to do things where it's sort of like he chooses a couple of shows that are like, oh, this is a classic TV show that feels like it should be a show. And then occasionally he would every year sort of be like, and maybe we'll do one or two weird things. And then Infinity Train was just one of the weird things. And I think it was just a very lucky thing in many ways, because when the pilot came out, Infinity Train has suffered a lot of luck and absolute horrible luck. It's like it's really on both sides. There's no like middle ground for the show. It's just like absolutely great luck and absolutely just the worst luck you could possibly have. When it came out, it was this like hit very suddenly on YouTube, and all these like views started rising and stuff, and it's this huge thing. And then 3 days later, the U.S. election happened between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. And then there was no space on the internet for anything else. Yeah. So the views just like cratered, and no one's watching the show, watching the pilot anymore. And so I was like, fuck Trump. And then,
yet another reason.
Yeah. And then over like next 2 weeks or so, it started gaining again, which I thought was really cool because it showed a certain longevity to it. And it was so cool. And I feel like that was happening, and then the Me Too movement was happening, and people were like, hey, maybe we should have shows that have women in them as main characters. And I think my pilot was like the only one that they had that had a female lead.
Oh, wow.
And it was very interesting because I remember when I made the pilot, I was told, hey, just so you know, your pilot's probably not going to get picked up. And I was like, well, why is that? And they said, well, because the main character is a woman, is a girl.
Oh, boy. Yeah.
And I was told that point blank.
Yeah.
And I said, at the time they were trying to do this Powerpuff Girls reboot. And I was like, well, nobody's watching the Powerpuff Girls to watch The Professor. And then the person just shrugged at me. And I was like, oh, okay, whatever. And so I just sort of accepted that it was never going to get picked up. And then all these things just sort of happened. And they're like, oh, we need a show with a girl. And I think they just were like, this one. Because it's the only one we have. And so like all these things sort of combined to make it happen. And then also that ultimately led to its detriment when I was like, I want to do a movie about a woman. They were like, no. And so there's a lot of stuff like that tended to happen with the show, unfortunately.
I feel like it's so true though. I feel like, I mean, I guess it depends on the network. I feel like some networks will be like more open to having female leads, but I have been in that space pitching an IP and they're just like, well, why don't we make them all boys? And I was just like, Just come on. Just give me that. Just give me,
I think about like when I was 4 years old, Alien 3 had come out. Mm-hmm. And so for some reason, Fox was like, you know what will be great? A bunch of toys for Alien for children. And so they made a whole bunch of Alien toys, and they're awesome. They're great toys. They look really cool. They're crazy looking. But at the time, I was like 4 years old, and I was playing with a toy, an Alien toy, and I had Ripley as a toy, and I had other various characters as toys, and also the Alien toys. And my mom came into the room and saw me playing with the toy, and I had Ripley with a little like flamethrower thing. And my mom was like, that's Ripley. In the movie that she was in, she was the only one that survived. She's the hero of the movie. And I remember I looked at this toy and I was like, what? And I was stunned. Like, I was 4 years old and I was blown away by the concept that a woman could be the main character hero of a movie. Mm-hmm. And I remember later on, when I remembered this happening, I was like, what the fuck? I was 4 years old and I had that already imprinted in my brain?
Yeah.
4 years old?
I think it's something that's like really, I mean, without going into a whole debate or whatever, I mean, I'm a strong believer of like nurture versus nature. And I think there's just so many examples of that. Like, I feel like at 4, you've already been exposed to like TV images, just so much symbolism, right? And I feel like that's kind of like a testament of like how important it is, like what we're doing, putting out these images and these stories,
and that stuff also matters when it comes from like authority figures and stuff as well, because like my mom told me that. Another thing my mom did one time, I remember I was at the YMCA and I wanted to try out gymnastics for a while, and so I was sitting there waiting for my turn, and the song YMCA came on like the intercom or whatever for like a step aerobics club that was next door, and I had heard this somehow, and I was like, I don't know, 9 years old or something. I said to my mom, I was like, Mom, the people who made this song, YMCA, they were gay. And my mom goes, so? And I was like, oh, okay. Yeah. And I just moved right past it. And
it's really funny you mentioned that, because I have like a very specific memory in my head when I was probably around 7 or 8. And I was like I was in the backseat of my mom's car. It was after school. And I don't know how the conversation got there, but she was like, oh, like I think your teacher. So my teacher was woman. She's like, I think she lives with the headmistress. So it was like, and I was like, 2 women can live together. And I was just like, this is the best thing. Like in my head, I was just like, because, like I was looking, I was like, oh, I hate, those games where it's like I don't know in English, like playing mommy and daddy, like you have like the baby and like,
playing house.
Yeah. I was like, I hate it. Like I didn't understand this game at all. But then when like it was like, sometimes a house can be 2 women, I was just like, this is the best day of my life.
Like I was very lucky that my parents were incredibly open-minded people. But I think there's all these things that like I just keep having to think about, where I'm like, why did society push this particular thought on me, and then I have to like unlearn it for the rest of my life? It sucks. Like I've brought this up on other things before, but I remember one time I was sitting in the back of somebody's truck when I was a kid, and there was a rap song that came on the radio, and I was like, oh, I kind of like this. And then my friend was like, oh no, you can't like this. And I was like, why? And he's like, well, because if you like rap, that means you're black and you don't want to be black. And I was like, oh, okay. Yeah. And like I just sort of accepted that. And the parents who were in the car also didn't seem to have a problem with that. Clearly they taught that to this kid.
Yeah.
And but it's just like one of those things that's like, why that sort of thing was just like pushed into my brain as a kid. And so the rest of my life has been like trying to undo shit like that.
Yeah.
And trying to make sure that whatever it is that I'm making isn't hurting somebody.
Yes.
Like that's my main thing, is like, it might not be helping, but I hope at least that I'm not hurting somebody,
Sure.
I mean, it even happened with characters on the show. Sometimes were pushed against
Really
because they
interesting.
weren't a white boy from the suburbs.
Mm-hmm.
Like we had that problem with Jesse. That was a character. He was native, and I was like, oh, I want to be this native character, and they were like, no, absolutely not. You can't do that. And I was like, why? And they were like, well, it's because, you could have chosen any race, but that one's just like that one's a really hard one. That's like a big third rail. And I was like, okay, but I just want like I want consultant to come in and we can like talk about it a bit and like all that sort of stuff. And they're like, no, absolutely not. And it took I want to say about 7 months of convincing to get them to be okay with it. And then I remember I had to have like a special like private talk with them and like all kinds of stuff. And they were like, he can't mention that he's native. He can't. And they listed off a bunch of things like he can't be poor. He can't be from reservation. He can't be this and this and this and this and this and all these things that I wasn't even planning on doing. And they had all these caveats on everything on it. I had to sit there and keep pushing back and pushing back. And then I remember I had to, what was it? Oh yeah. The only mention that he ever makes is in one episode where he talks about going to powwow or something. And that was something that I specifically was talking with a consultant about. And we were only able to make that reference because we had some other line there that was, I don't even remember what it was. We had some other line there, but we were recording. I was like, oh, I asked if we could we just record this one line quick and just get it into the show? And they're like, yeah, sure. And the line was about the powwow. And so the way that I did it was I had Robbie Damon come in for a different episode in our 4th season, because that's what we were recording at that point. And I had him come in and play a bunch of like cowboy bugs. And then I was like, also, while you're here, could you just record this line quick as Jesse? And he was like, okay. And then he did it. And then we were able to like put it in post and just go like, bah! And just make some sort of mention of where he's from. And similar thing happened with our characters in the last season, Ryan and Min. I knew that there was some person that asked, like, is Owen serious with this? And they thought that I was doing like a Burger King Kids Club kind of thing intentionally. And it's just like, no, I just want people to be seen. This is a genuine thing that I want. And it was tough sometimes.
Yeah.
There's a bit of a I always accept some responsibility as a creator that like if we manage to get to the position where you're creating things for a huge audience, like I think you should have to try to do those things. It's like, because it's
there was,
I don't know.
Well, there was a behind the scenes thing with South Park at one point when they said something. Masto and Trey Parker said something about like, we're given 15 hours a year to say anything that we want.
Yeah.
Anything. So we should make it count.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, I agree with that. And so I try to at least live by something as similar as I can, with as little power as I have.
Yeah. And it's still, it's still pretty powerless because it's, at the end of the day, it's execs and corporations that are way, way more powerful than a showrunner. But still, it's like whatever you can do, I think is worth doing. We like to ask our guests about creative block and how it feels for them and how they deal with it. So
horrible.
Yeah, that's about right.
It's the worst. I hate it. I hate everything about it. It puts me into massive states of depression, and I have to talk to my therapist a lot whenever I have creative block. Mm-hmm. The thing that I've found is that the best way for me to sort of get over it is to go do something else entirely. Mm-hmm. That's what me going to Yellowstone was. That's what me going to China was. Is something completely unrelated to what I normally do, which gives you inspiration for what you normally do. So I've often had people ask me like, hey, like, where do you get ideas? And like, what's the best thing that I should do when I'm trying to become an animator or like a storyboard artist or like whatever, show creator, whatever it is. And I always say that basically what's going to happen is everyone's going to give you the advice of you should draw all the time. And my advice is the exact opposite.
Yeah.
My advice is you should go do something else entirely. Because if I have to read another comic that starts with a person sitting at their Cintiq,
Yeah.
I'm going to fucking kill myself. Like, don't do that. Because all it shows to me is that you have nothing interesting to say. You haven't done anything. Your whole life is sitting in front of a computer, and that's what I'm doing right now while I'm looking at your comics. So why would I want to? Why would I want to continue doing
Owen.
that?
Isn't it? So relatable?
I hate it.
Yeah.
So,
I agree.
So my advice is always like, I don't know, go pick up go bake bread. I don't know. I have so many hobbies. You have no idea. Let's see. I make music. I make jam. I do woodworking. Right now I'm making board games. I make video games. I make models. There's like so many. I laser cut stuff. I'm looking around my room right now going like, what else is in this room? There's
That's awesome.
all kinds of, screen printing, like all kinds of stuff that are all, kind of creative in general, but it's just something that's like, it makes you use a different part of your brain, and it gives you something to talk about that isn't just, oh, I messed up and I did my final art on my bottom layer. Like I don't want to, who cares?
That's so funny. That's so true.
Yeah, it's important to have hobbies outside of it, and those things always end up informing. They come back to the work anyway, right? Because it's like you're putting gas in the tank, like you're.
Yeah, I think it's very important to travel, and even if you don't have a lot of money, just
drive to a different
cheaply.
city.
Drive cheaply. Like there are things you can do that are going out on adventures and improving your life in some way that are totally doable. And I often don't take my own advice and do this stuff, but it is what works best for me. I take a tech-free vacation once a year where I just go to like an Airbnb or a national park or something, and I leave my phone at home, and I leave my computer at home, and I just go there using a map and and I bring like a sketchbook and a couple of books or something, and then what happens is I go insane because I'm by myself and I have nothing to do, and there's nothing to do. And you don't realize just how much of your day is spent like quickly looking at your phone to alleviate boredom until you suddenly don't have it. And then you're like, well, I have to do something with my time. And then, so I would say it's like a cleanse. So it usually lasts about 5 days. And I would say by day 3, I'm usually feeling a lot more like, all right, I'm going to read a comic. I'm going to go do this thing. But on day 1 and 2, I'm just like, what the fuck am I supposed to do? Like, I'm so going crazy. And I just don't know what to do with my hands or my body. And I'm just like, I walk or I pace around in a room by myself quietly and like just talking to myself. I'm just like an insane person. And, but by day 3, like, I'm like, oh, I'm a little more chill. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to learn, I'll make an omelet. Like, that's what I'm going to do with my time, or like, I'm just going to go walk a direction for an hour. And yeah, it's pretty nuts.
I think that is so true. I feel like in the sense that like even just reading a book is just like, if you're not used to putting your phone down for extended periods of time, I've noticed that like staying focused on just reading. Yeah. And sometimes I struggle just because of the technology in my life. And I mean, it's possible to unlearn it. Like you said, it doesn't take that long. It's not going to take like a whole month. It's going to take just a couple of days, but
Yeah. Since I've gotten married, my wife does make me take my phone with me now.
Sure.
Oh yeah.
But I take it and I put it in like the trunk of my car. but I used to just go and like just not have my phone. And I remember like it was even maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I was calling people from like a payphone that I found. I'm like, I remember calling people and being like, guess what? And they're like, what? And I'm like, I'm talking from a payphone. Isn't that crazy?
The novelty of it.
Yeah.
There's not that many left. I actually took a picture of a payphone once because I was like, I haven't seen one of those in years.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so funny.
Yeah. We had a lot of questions on Twitter, and thank you all so much for asking them. We do not have time to get to all of them, but let me ask some of the ones that stuck out to me.
Sure.
From @Cash, question is, keeping your own experiences in mind, how do you feel about the power internet audiences can have with supporting creator-driven animation, whether backed by a network or independent? Are you still happy for the support that Infinity Train got, and hope other projects get the same?
Oh yeah, I mean, the internet is great for doing that stuff. I think the thing that people have to keep in mind is like the internet is made up of people, and so when you back something or you try to promote something, you have to keep in mind that the person that you're promoting is a human being, and they might not do exactly what you're hoping they might do, and the project might not end up being exactly what you thought it might be, but it is something that's really important. And Infinity Train is like trended on Twitter a few times, and I've definitely used that when talking to executives and being like, look how much people like Infinity Train, and I can like point to numbers, which is really nice. Using numbers is incredibly helpful. So I think it's great. I think it's a democratization of art when we're talking about the crossroads of commerce and art that is animation and filmmaking and stuff like that. I think it's a really great way to democratize the process a bit, so that it's not just some suits making some decisions. It's some suits that are making some decisions, and there's a lot of people that are like pressuring them in some way to make those decisions. And I think that you can get things that might not otherwise be made because there's a lot of support online for it. So yeah, I think it's a great way to get unusual things made and things that speak to more people, and they're not just like superheroes or whatever.
Yeah. Somebody else asked from @ScripterB, how have you experienced pushback about topics in your shows that may be too dark? Infinity Train was so unique because it didn't shy away from monstrous things and behaviors. How do you think we can get more shows that explore similar topics?
You get more shows that explore similar topics by watching and supporting the shows that do those things. Absolutely. That's pretty much it. Like on all these streaming services, they track absolutely everything they possibly can about you. So if you're watching shows like that, then they'll be like, oh, people want to watch shows like that, and then that's what they'll do. Certain streamers are more likely to trust whatever their algorithm has designed for them. Certain networks are more likely to be a little more hand-picked on that sort of thing. But numbers, it's basically just like watch the things, support the things, get them, tell other people about those things, and that's kind of the way it has to go. I can't really think of any other way to make those things happen more.
No, yeah.
Except to just show that there's support for them in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah, I think people undervalue how much just engaging with content, how important it is, and being vocal about it too. Going back to what you were saying earlier.
And it's also like, I'm currently pitching a lot of things to a lot of studios, and all the things that I'm pitching are much more adult. They're like more adult animated things, and they're specifically like adult non-comedy animated things. And there is the executives of all these studios know that is going to be a thing. All of them, every single one of them knows that it's going to be a thing, and so it's just sort of like they need the push to do it. So it means like they need one network to already make that decision to make adult animated stuff, or they need there to be like a huge mass online thing for it. They just need a bit of a push, but they all know it's coming, and so they're all looking for it. They're just really tentative right now, but it's coming, and you can see that it's coming based on Arcane or those Star Wars things, or like Marvel's What If. Like that's the way it's going to go for a little while. Is it's going to be things that are IP driven, adult animated, non-comedy stuff. And that's how we'll get those, is that it'll be IP driven, so they'll feel more comfortable being like, oh, we want to make this thing. It's an IP, so people already know it, so it'll advertise itself, and that helps. And so if you just keep watching those things, they will get one of two messages. They'll either get, oh, IP is what people want, or they'll get, oh, older adult animated stuff is what people want. But if you just keep watching those things and keep supporting them, they'll make more. That's how it works, because right now they're all these networks are like starved for content right now. So like it's tough pitching older adult animated stuff, but I know that there's more being pitched, and I know that executives are looking for it, and so like it is coming. It's coming. I swear to God, it's coming.
I can see that.
It's just going to take a little bit of extra time.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's going to be a big explosion of it in like maybe 3 to 4 years, after we get 1 or 2 big hits. Because like there'll be these tentative sort of pushes, like maybe we'll try an adult animation here. I don't know. We'll try one of these. I don't know. And one of them is going to be a big hit. And then there will be another one that's a big hit. And once you get 2, then it'll be like, oh, there's actually like a market there. And then they'll start buying up more and more and more of those things. And yeah, it'll happen.
You're talking specifically for like drama type.
Adult
animation. Yeah. That's interesting. I think that's very true.
Yeah. At Shiny Scribbles said, oh boy, Infinity Train is my favorite show ever, so I gotta make it count. So their question is, how long did it take from the moment the pilot was published to receive the green light, and what was your reaction to it as well as to the pilot's success?
I think it took about a year. I think the pilot, it took a year to make the pilot, and then I think it took another 8 to 9 months, somewhere in there, maybe a year to actually get the pilot greenlit. And my reaction was, it's odd. I want to say it's just like surprise and, oh, this is so cool, and it was, but it also felt correct. It's weird. It's an odd feeling, but it felt like when it happened, I was like, yeah, this is what should happen. And it was kind of peaceful, actually. It was exciting and all those sorts of things, but there was a certain part of my brain that was just like, yeah, great, that's what should happen. We should make this thing. And it was sort of this calm, peaceful, like, and now I will go make this thing.
Yeah.
Awesome. It was kind of nice. Obviously.
Sure. From at Flippy Super, they asked, given your experience, what advice would you give future cartoon showrunners?
That's the one where I'd say go out and do random stuff. So you have experience to draw from. It's important to have things to draw from, because if there's anything that I've found is that when you're pitching a show, it really, really helps if you can say, so this thing happened to me and I was experiencing this and this and this. And they love personal anecdotes. So if you can say how this thing was real and it really happened to you, they'll be like, oh, wow, this is a real thing that happened. And then they'll be more likely to pick it up.
Yeah, there's like a book that execs all must read, because it's like, I feel like they're always cluing in on like the personal experience kind of stuff. And it's, to me, it's funny because a good writer can write anything based on just observation, and it's like, it's funny that you have to have those, but I've definitely experienced that where it's like,
it definitely helps.
They light up. Yeah.
That was actually one of the difficult things I had with Infinity Train, is because like my parents didn't get divorced, but I grew up with a lot of kids around me who that happened to, and they would use my house growing up as sort of a bit of a refuge from where they were coming from.
Right.
So that was sort of how I had to talk about it, was talking about my experiences with my friends and that sort of thing. But even that is better than, I was just making up a story about whatever. It doesn't. They don't really latch onto that very well.
Yeah. Do you? What are your goals for the future? What kind of stuff do you hope to accomplish in the years to come?
I want non-comedy adult animation to pick up and take off.
It is coming.
And I want to be a part of that, and I want to push that. And doing everything I can to make sure that happens. But it's like, it's hard. I was, I was unemployed for a year, and I just got employed over the past December.
Mm-hmm.
So like I'm pushing it, and I'm using any sort of opportunity I have whenever I get into a meeting with executives to be like, this is happening and it's coming. And that's what I want to do. I want to make like some adult drama animated shows or movies or something.
Yeah.
Or action, sci-fi, like any sort of things like that doesn't have to have comedy in it. And it's not that I don't love comedy. I worked on Regular Show, and I, and Fame Train has a bunch of comedy in it. It's just that it's a space that I feel just needs to happen, and I want to be a part of making that happen.
Mm-hmm. It's coming. There's a lot. I mean, it hasn't been really a thing until recently, but there's little examples popping up, and I love to see it. It's great.
Mm-hmm.
It's coming.
Like Primal and Invincible, like there's these shows.
Even Undone on Prime. I don't know if you guys good.
Well, that's the end of this creative block. Owen, thanks for being our guest and sharing your story.
Yeah.
And thanks to our listeners. Follow us on Twitter. It's @CreativeBlock, creative without the vowel, where we ask for drawing prompts and questions to ask our guests. Huge thanks to our editor, Clements, for editing the podcast, and Malik for helping us produce the show.
If you love our show, then support us on Patreon. Becoming a patron gets you early access to interviews as well as bonus episodes. Click the link in the description of this episode. I've been your host, Gene.
And I was V. Keeping creative, and we'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.